guys, good afternoon. My apologies. I didn't realize until the other day that I had not put up a video of me going over the latest page of notes, which in your PowerPoint notes says 50's culture. And it really breaks my heart that I can't be with you to be going over this in person, because this is a lot of fun. We listen to all kinds of music. We watch a clip of I Love Lucy. I wear my poodle skirt. It's a whole thing. But anyway, so this page of notes, I think I put it and posted it before the break. I can't remember. But this is focusing a lot, some of Section 1 Cold War stuff from yesterday, and a lot from Section 2 stuff today. So if you want to open up your PowerPoint, or not PowerPoint, but if you want to open up your notes and kind of look through it as I go over this, but this is 50's culture. All right, so you hopefully have seen it already and you've written down the extra pieces highlighted in yellow. It starts off talking about Eisenhower and Eisenhower's interstate highway system. Eisenhower was in the military and he had driven East Coast to West Coast, and he said it took weeks because some places out west were nothing but dirt roads. So he said, we've got to do something about having an actual paved highway system. And it'll do two things. Number one, it starts up our trucking industry. And number two, sets a fire for tourism. I mean, we've had cars since the 1920s, but now people, again, post-war economy, World War II's over, we've got time, people are cashing in. War bonds, we've got money, so let's do some road trips. And there's pros and cons to that. If you've ever seen the Disney movie Cars, the con is that the new interstate highway system, which is fantastic, makes travel easier and faster, also avoids going into small, little, tiny hometown areas, which had been thriving off of tourism. Restaurants, hotels, shopping centers. And so a lot of those towns are going to die because of the interstate highway system. So there's pros and cons to it. $25 billion is spent on paving 40,000 miles of interstate highway. Again, starts our trucking industry. We're going to do more traveling. We're going to do sightseeing. We're going to do family trips. So it definitely boosts the economy, and people are moving out to the suburbs to get away from the cities. As soon as cars came about, that's what people were doing. They were moving out of the dirty, crowded, nasty cities. Cities aren't going to grow but 10% because everybody's getting out of the cities. And the cities do experience what they call the white flight, to where they see a lot of middle and upper class white Americans moving out of the cities and a lot of minorities staying in. And so that kind of talks about the changing of the dynamics of the economic situation of the cities. We'll talk more about that later. But we also have what we call the baby boom generation that comes about between 1945 and 1961. 65 million children. I mean, guys get home from war and they're starting families, and we're popping out kids like crazy. So baby boom happens. But it's kind of perfect timing because along with this baby boom generation, we have all this great advancements in medical technology that comes about because Jonas Salk, trying to find his name, Jonas Salk comes out with a vaccination for polio. So it's awesome news. And for a period of time, we were able to eradicate polio, it's awesome. A lot of diseases had been eradicated: measles, mumps, rubella, things that you get vaccinated for as a baby. Unfortunately, in the 21st century, there have been a lot of different people and groups that have said don't vaccinate for different reasons. There's a lot of celebrities. I know Jenny McCarthy was a celebrity that got on the whole don't vaccinate your kid because, my kid became autistic after he was vaccinated because, there's mercury in these vaccinations or something. She was trying to find something to leech onto as to why her son developed autism. And so that kind of steamrolled and fell into other groups and categories that again, for different reasons, said that maybe you shouldn't vaccinate your kids. But because you don't vaccinate, then these diseases that had been eradicated come back. Polio is one of them, which would have helped FDR, who developed polio in the 1930s. But anyway, because of all these babies, Dr. Spock is, and this is not a guy from Star Trek. If you're a Star Trek fan, I'm not, but I know of the name. But Dr. Spock is going to write a book called Baby and Child Care, and it is the Bible almost for stay-at-home moms of how to raise all these kids during this post-war economy. And it shows you a picture of his book. All right, so TV. TV is developed and becomes widely mass-produced in the mid-late 1940s. But by the 1950s, everybody is scrambling and saving to purchase their very first television set. And it was one. Just like when cars came out, you wanted to scrimp and save just to get one. And so that's what everybody got. And if you had a TV, it was in your living room, your family room. That's what you did. You ate dinner, and then you went in the living room, and you watched TV as a family. And here's another thing. TV starts out as, even though I know it says on there that we have the FCC that is regulating everything. They're the ones that put, if something's considered, TVMA for mature audiences. You know what I'm saying? But they didn't have things like that because everything that was on TV was family friendly. And I mean everything. Like the news today sometimes shows too much blood and violence and things like that. But you didn't have to worry about things like that in the 1950s. TV shows, everything that you saw, soap operas, everything was family friendly. So there was really no need to have to worry about if the kids are in the room. Are they going to hear that curse word? Or are they going to see this violence? And that's why one of the many reasons why they also call it the golden age of television, because it's all these great family-friendly, fun shows. And number one, also a personal favorite of mine, I Love Lucy. And if you've never seen I Love Lucy, you should have time during all this quarantining to check out at least an episode of I Love Lucy, if not more. Binge watch it if you can find it. It's wholesome fun. So I Love Lucy, quiz shows, soap operas, pretty much everything that's children's shows, Long Ranger, Green Hornet, everything that started off as a radio show will develop into a TV show. Advertising, obviously, is going to be big on TV, and advertising does become very sexist during this time period, to where if it's a car being advertised, it's probably going to be a man that you're going to see. If it's a home appliance, then you're going to see a woman. She's going to be in her pearls and dress and apron, showing off a brand new electric stove or toaster that she bought for the home. And if you didn't notice already in these pictures, everything is very conservative. The way you dress is very conservative. Going to school, it didn't really matter what social class you were. You didn't wear jeans. Jeans were not a popular trend. If you were a boy, you wore some type of slack pants, no shorts. If you were a girl, skirt or dress. Not that you didn't see women and girls wear pants, but it was a very rare occasion. Skirts and dresses, that's what you wore. Very covered. You didn't expose what I call the 3 B's, boobs, belly, and butt, or even back, 4 B's, right? The 4 B's. You didn't expose yourself. Very conservative trends in the 1950s. Radio, still big, but the biggest thing for radio is now that it's in cars. We have perfected technology to where we can make things small enough now to where these transistor radios are now the size we can put them in cars, which is also going to help us make small things like the first small calculator, and it's not even really that small, but calculators, again, this is the beginning of the computer age, things like that. Date night is going to the drive-in movie theater. you're tuning in to either a radio box that's outside the window of your car, or you're tuning in your radio that's in your car if your car does have a radio, which it is not something being mass produced in cars yet. It's kind of like if you go to a car dealership today and they have what they call a basic model, which doesn't have leather seats, doesn't have power doors, power stuff, you know what I'm saying? Base model, things like that. You're not going to have a radio in a base model car of the 1950s. If you want a radio in your car, it's because you paid higher up for it. You paid more for it, right? All right, and beatniks. That's the pre-hippie culture, the counter culture of the 1950s, or the beatniks. They feel like they've been beaten down by the man, by society, by the government. This is the whole era of coffee shops and listening to poetry and snapping along as somebody reads a poem about how they're being pushed down for not conforming to the rest of society. So the beatniks, again, the counterculture of the 1950s. Rock and roll, obviously, is the number one thing for the 1950s. I mean, that's it. Rock and roll music defines the culture of the 1950s. Everybody's happy. It's post-war. We're cashing in war bonds. We're buying all these new pieces of technology. We're getting our new TVs. We're buying our Levitt townhouse. Times are good for the most part. When you're not thinking about the Red Scare and communism and the Soviet Union and need to be building bomb shelters because we're worried about a nuclear war. When you're not thinking about that stuff, the 1950s are a really exciting time period. So you've got all the big names. You've got Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly. You've got Little Richard. All these are the big names of the 1950s. Jerry Lee Lewis, very interesting guy. If you ever have free time and you're like, hey, I'd really like to watch a movie about a 1950s individual, Jerry Lee Lewis is an interesting one to watch, just because this guy is crazy. His music's good, but I don't know if all the lights are on upstairs. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, Jerry Lee Lewis, his movie is Great Ball of Fire. Check it out if you have time. All right, so anyway, these variety shows, these bandstand shows, are what you would watch on TV. It's like a concert in your living room, pretty much, and you're listening to. I would almost say it's almost like the finale of America's Got Talent, where you have all these different singers and bands and different acts that come on, and you watch them. So anyway, that's popular with TV during that time period. But here's the interesting thing before we get ready to wrap up this. The interesting thing is this is also the beginning of the feminist movement. I want you to star that. Betty Friedan is going to write a book called The Feminine Mystique. And the women's liberal movement really gets going more in the 60s, but it does begin her writing her book about, women as housewives don't feel fulfilled being stuck as a wife and a mother. And they shouldn't have to feel like that's what their life is all about. Another good reference is Mona Lisa's Smile with Julia Roberts. Beautiful movie, so good, and talks about this. Talks about Betty Friedan's idea that women should not have to just sit around waiting to be married so they can go home and take care of the house, the kids, and the husband. That they should be and are able to do more, have a job, have their own money, have independence. But in the 1950s, that's really... they almost revert back. It's kind of, all the good that was done of the flappers of the 1920s. It's almost like women are wanting to go backwards in time and revert back to staying home, take care of the house, the kids, the husband. And a lot of that does have to be because of men coming back from war. Women are not needed in these jobs anymore. So anyway, food for thought if you get a chance. Lots of good shows and movies. If you ever want a recommendation of something that goes along with the time period that we're talking about, let me know. I can set you up, okay? But again, last two things that are really interesting, and I kind of went over this in the wrong order, is the fact that poverty, there are a lot of people, like a fourth of Americans are still at or below the poverty line during the 1950s. And it's like, how is that possible? Because the 1950s are booming with our economy. Like, we are up. You know how I sometimes talk about the economy being like a roller coaster, you know? We hit the peak. Like the 1950s, we're doing awesome. We're up top. People are spending money. We're pumping out all kinds of products. Things are going well, but there's actually still a fourth of Americans that we call, the other America, that have not seen things get better since the Great Depression. They're still struggling. They're still hoping that the government's going to provide some kind of aid for them. And as the white flight happens, as people with money move out of the cities, and all that's left in the cities are the lower income, poverty stricken Americans, it's going to drag the cities down because the tax and income is not there to clean things up. And what's worse of all that is the cities like, we need to clean up these slum areas. Well, the slum areas are where the people that don't have the money are having to live. Well, if you destroy all those buildings and apartment complexes, well, now you've just made all those people homeless. You might have cleaned your city up and made it look better on that block or several of those blocks, but now you just made a bunch of people homeless. So is that helping anybody's situation, right? So last but not least, we are getting ready. At the end of this week, we're going to pivot, and we're going to start working and talking about civil rights. Civil rights start in the 1950s. It really gets going. 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. They overturn the Plessy versus Ferguson issue and say that segregation is illegal, that it's not fair because nothing is equal. And we talked about that from day one. Yeah, everything was separate, and it was easy for it to be separate, but nothing was equal. And so we realize as we get closer to the mid and late 1950s that all groups, not just African Americans, Hispanic Americans, which it talks about Hispanic Americans, are being discriminated upon. They're having to go to their children are going to segregated schools. Good news is that the Citizenship Act comes through and Native Americans are given their citizenship in 1924, and it was like, what? Native Americans, people that have been here for hundreds of thousands of years, are just now getting their citizenship? That's insane. The irony, But anyway, so 1924 Citizenship Act gives Indians their citizenship to actually be called Americans. You've got the Indian Reorganization Act that happens 10 years later, 1934, and this is what gives Native Americans their tribal land back. So here in North Carolina, you've got the Cherokee that have their own territory up in the mountains. That's their tribal land. And if you go on their tribal land, you actually see signs up everywhere. They have their own police department. They have everything. Now, what is sad is to see the amount of poverty in that area. That is really devastating to see. But they govern themselves. That is their tribal land to control up there. So 1934, they are given their land back. This is kind of a small payback for the years and years and years of heartache and torture and disappointment. I mean, you can't really say that that's trying to give them back everything that's been taken from them, 1950s, the termination policy to bring Native Americans into mainstream society. What this is talking about is the idea of what else should Native Americans be given, and it's federal government's way of kind of throwing it on the state. Well, you delegate it how you want to with the Native American tribe that's in your state, you know. And again, a lot of that was just allowing them to govern and control their tribal lands. Okay. All right. We're going to stop there for today. I went a little bit too long. Sorry. See you guys later.